SIX's beautiful Asia headquarters in Singapore to talk about sanctions monitoring and sanctions regimes and how they impact your business and how you can mitigate and manage the associated risks.
Okay.
So Robert, Neil, welcome.
Thank you.
Why is sanctions monitoring important for firms in general and also for Asian firms, and how can SIX help them with this?
Well, simply because it's like doing business in a place where you can do it. You can be, committing, overstepping on crime lines. You can be dealing business with people you don't want to, or are in big, exposure worldwide. And the ultimate risk is huge fines. Mm-hmm. So companies would like today to spend their money wiser than just take fines, and therefore a sanction monitoring service helps them to spend wisely their money.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the sanctions piece has really taken off in the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. Ever since Russia and the Crimea incident, the scale of a sanctions monitoring has gone exponential, so that people can't handle the volume of data that was prior to that incident. And since that, sanctions has become a more and more common tool for governments to use to put pressure on other governments around the world.
Well, I would say to you, sanctions at the end of the day affects what we call ultimate beneficiaries of the service, and it's a lot of individuals who are part of a country or part of a jurisdiction. And in that respect, Asia is seeing an explosion of individual wealth. And therefore, you would just want to make sure that your advisory business, your counterparty business, is as compliant and as clean as it can be. Mm-hmm. And therefore, here, it's more than anywhere else. Money is just coming out of everywhere.
Okay. So what are some of the key sanctions regimes that firms must continuously monitor to avoid the penalties and the risks that you mentioned?
So when you look at, so firstly, the banks in Asia, right, are not working in isolation within their countries. Most of them are not just domestic banks. They have an international flavor. Therefore, they're exposed to other governments' regimes around sanctions. So we need to make sure that we cover sanctions regimes that are globally applicable. So we look at the big players like the OFAC in the US, the UN, the EU, but particularly in Asia as well. You have Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan all have a sanctions policy against other countries around the world. So they need to be, these global banks or regional banks need to be globally compliant.
What are some of the main pain points that firms face while they're, putting together a sanctions compliance regime? I mean, is having a robust KYC and AML process enough for them to be in full compliance of the sanctions regimes that you mentioned?
No, I think is the easy answer to that. When you look at sanctions monitoring, I guess it's a big part of KYC. You want to know what, from a private banking, wealth management, client advisory perspective, you want to know if you're taking on new customers, what assets are they bringing with them? Are they bringing, particularly in Asia, which is very fragmented, are they bringing different types of assets which actually are under sanction? You don't want to bring that into your bank. Mm-hmm. So you want to know what it is. So when you bring onboardings of customers, you need to understand that. Mm-hmm. Secondly, there's the reputational risk of being seen to be dealing in sanctions regimes or with countries under sanction and securities of that type. You obviously you want to make sure that you'll appeal to your customer base as much as possible, making sure you're compliant in this area stops bad news stories happening. But I think more importantly than that, the appetite from the banks to be compliant. They don't want to, if you look at it from a social perspective, they don't want to be investing in these securities. They want to make sure they're compliant so that they can drive economies in the right way, with good compliance and good governance across what they're trying to do.
Can I add something here? Because you mentioned KYC and AML. KYC and AML are processes that happen at a client onboarding. Mm-hmm. So it's a snapshot at the beginning. Mm-hmm. The service we have is what we call a continuous monitoring service.
Yes.
Which means we do KYC AML at the beginning, but then this is continuously monitored. Mm-hmm. And this is important because sanctioned countries and beneficial owners are becoming more and more clever. They hide behind complex and very complicated structures, so they become less and less visible.
Okay.
And therefore, you would need a lot of data crunching, a lot of search, a lot of cross-referencing of the underlying assets, services, instruments to find that out. So really the challenge here, the pain point is, if you as one bank or one company would like to do that, you would need to invest a lot of time in data management, data search, data acquisition, and all that stuff. And therefore we think that in our, this is our job, this is our DNA. So we offer the service as an ongoing process, not just as a snapshot.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think that segues really well into my next question, which is, what are some of the pitfalls around data quality and data management that Asian firms, as you mentioned, that there's been sort of an explosion of the kind of maybe PEPs and beneficial owners that firms need to continue to track on whether or not they're on sanctions list. So what are some of the pitfalls around that area for this region, and how do you, maybe you can talk a little bit about how your service helps firms navigate those pitfalls?
Well, it starts with the root cause of our business, which is data aggregation. Right? So we collect data directly from exchanges all across Asia. Anybody who wants to do that, if a bank wants to do that, that's where they have to start, is collecting the data. And in order to understand the link between the domicile, the entity, and any securities which they're issuing. And there's not many organizations in the world that have the data that linked in a way that we do that can provide that value. So by adding those rule sets by some people, a group of people within SIX, they are able to apply this list of sanctioned securities by partly by research, you say by uncovering the subterfuge which goes on in this space, but also by ensuring that the good quality data is there, so that we know when entities are onboarding, that we cover all of the listings which are being issued by those organizations.
I'll get back to your point about the Asian aspect of the whole thing. We used to do what we did for Europe, US, Latin America. The Asian angle is simply, if I may use the word simply, adding a fourth element to the complex story. And here the economy is booming, is growing faster than other places, which means that there will be more companies, more securities, more wealth, more individuals. And also the economy is becoming more global. So that means that the old good old days where Europeans invest in Europe, Americans in the US, and Asians in Asia is gone. Now it's all over the place. And therefore, I think the Asian angle is for us a challenge, but at the same time maybe a good opportunity to build on what we have done, extend it, and prove to ourselves that we do have a scalable solution and we can track the growth of the global economy in that perspective.
Okay.
You see, the whole story about sanction is to provide right data, right information. We cannot get it wrong. We can't provide an investor with an information on a sanctioned entity or beneficial owner and this must not be wrong. It has to be right.
Yeah. So going forward, where do you see the sanctions and the AML monitoring regulatory regime in the next 3 to 5 years, and what role will Asia play in this sort of side of your business?
So SIX really want to grow in Asia in the regulatory space. Obviously, we're working around the sanctions area a lot because it's one of those services where there's an immediate need. Not just now, but I think you could, as you say, 3 to 5 years. The sanctions is not going to go away fast. It's going to change as well. You look at the divergence between the EU's position on Iran and then the US's position on Iran. It causes more complexity, and I personally do not foresee the political landscape and the way that sanctions are used against other countries changing quickly. this is going to be here for a while. It may evolve. They may bring back the levels of sanctions, but it may even grow. So we really want to take that regulatory services, sanction services to the Asian market now, and make our services available to more regional banks.